Hi, Janeen Vosper here, and welcome to this episode of the We Are Women podcast. Today, I have with me Suzanne. Now, Suzanne, I've got dropped off your surname, Culberg. Culberg, yes. Welcome, Suzanne. And Suzanne is a mindset coach for weight loss, which I think after all of us are carrying our COVID calories, I know I went and tried on some clothes recently and went, I think I need to definitely talk to Suzanne about this. Suzanne believes that people often gain too much weight themselves because they give too much to others and they overeat because they overgive. So the solution is to deal with the pattern of overgiving, not the pattern of overeating. This is going to be really interesting because I think it's not something that we don't necessarily think about. So to deal with that and food issues will largely take care of themselves when you do. Suzanne's passion is to help women Suzanne's passion is to help women is fueled by her own weight journey, going from 150 kilos to maintaining a healthy 72 kilo weight, which she is now. Suzanne knows that no single approach is right for every individual. So she uses a mix of modalities, including Neuro-Linguistic Programming, hypnosis, energy healing to give her clients the accountability to create lasting change. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Janeen.
It's all of those different modalities really attracted me to having this conversation with you because they're things that I particularly believe in and are interested in as well. And so I want to hear a little bit more about your journey and obviously what got you into doing what you were doing and what you found along the way.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a perfect time to have this conversation. As you said, a lot of us need to social distance from our fridge.
Oh, I like that.
So, yeah, I went on my first diet, or was put on my first diet when I was 4. My oldest sister was getting married and I didn't fit the flower girl dress that was made for me. So we were introduced to the diet at that stage, and we'd all clean out our pantry on Sunday afternoon, start on Monday, quit by Thursday, eat all weekend, start again, as I'm sure many people are familiar with. So that was my entire childhood. And when I moved out at 18, I stopped that. Like, I just ate all the time and ballooned really, really large. And when I got to my early 20s, I was at medical school. So before that, I was going to be a doctor. And I started Weight Watchers and I lost 43 kilos. While I was doing it, I did personal training. And I was like, this is the answer. It's personal training. So I quit medical school and I trained to become a personal trainer. And I did that for a couple of years.
That's a big shift.
I did that for a couple of years. I moved into state. That was my excuse, but we all have our reasons. I regained all that weight and more. And then I lost 60 kilos and I then fell pregnant. So I used that as an excuse, and then I regained all that with interest. So I'm very familiar with the up and down, up and down, up and down. Very good at following a diet to the letter. But then getting to that point where you just can't stand it anymore and fall off spectacularly and wait for the motivation to come back. So I knew there must be something deeper. There must be something more to this, because I was a smart person, yet this was my Achilles heel. So I started looking into like mindset stuff. I came across NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. At first I thought it was a crock, to be honest. But, when you're not open, like if your mind's closed, then the mindset stuff isn't going to work. But I stayed with it, and it took me 3 years, and I released 78 kilograms, and I kept that off. And I think that's a big shift, is language. We don't realize how powerful our language is and how we inadvertently hypnotize ourselves. So like for weight loss, whenever you lose something, you want to find it again. It's unconscious. You lose your wallet, you lose your keys, you lose your kids in the shopping center. It's like, so although consciously you don't want that weight back, the subconscious is programmed to be that way. So little shifts in the language, like I've released it, I thank it for its service. I no longer need it, and accepting that all those failures were what I needed to learn to be able to going forward. And then how the overgiving thing came in. So I started working, I trained in NLP after I'd had the success with it myself. I started working with people. And I kept finding this pattern. Like, people knew what to do. They'd buy the groceries, meal plan, join the gym, and then something would happen and the groceries would be wilting in the fridge and they'd buy cheap and cheerful because it keeps everyone happy. Or they would plan to go to the gym and then something would come up and they'd just go, I'll go tomorrow, or I'll go next week. And it's just like this cycle of overgiving that shows up for the clients I work with in weight, but in many areas of our life where we make the plans and then people need our help. So we put our plans on hold, overgive to them, burn out, feel guilty, overeat, make the plans again. And it's like just this cycle that happens on repeat.
It's really interesting. Yeah. That's not something that I would have thought of. It was when you were describing losing weight, I did exactly, because I use different terminology than that. I usually use removed or something, so it's gone, it's not lost. And then as soon as you said that you released it, it has a totally different energy to it as well. It just feels very different than what we're trying to do all the time is lose weight.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And that cycle that you talk about, I think there's so many people that will be able to relate to that. 4-year-old is very young to be starting on a diet. And obviously there were not necessarily healthy eating plans in place that you could have learned from, or were, because the parents control 100% of the food that a 4-year-old has. It's not a 4-year-old's going to school and eating the wrong thing. It's 100% what the parents are training and educating at that particular age, isn't it? But it's a behaviour.
Funny you should say that, but because I've reflected on this. When we were getting measured, so the dresses for my sister's wedding were made by a seamstress, and I'd always seen my mum and my sister suck in their bellies when they put clothes on. So when the seamstress was there, I just sucked in my belly because that's what I thought you did. So nobody, I'm not knocking the seamstress, but you think she would have picked up on that. Obviously she didn't. So when the dress came back, it didn't fit. So instead of being like, oh, perhaps we should have it let out, I don't know. I'm sure my mum has her reasons, but okay, we're going to go on a diet. So I think, because when I look back at pictures of me when I was young, I was a little bit bigger than the others, but not a lot. Like, I'm an endomorph. I've got a bigger bone structure. Mm. But it's interesting how something can set us up. And then the thing that we're trying to abolish, fight against, we go about creating in the way that we are trying to go about it in the wrong way. So,
yeah. Yes. Tell me a little bit more about the giving. That's just really fascinating, because I've never heard it explained that way before, but it does make so much sense. It makes sense to me on a tangible level, going, oh, I'm just too busy. I've got all these list of things to do. I'm too busy to stick to the food plan that I had planned because I've got so much to do. So that tangible level I can get, but it's deeper than that, isn't it?
It totally is. And I think it's at the deepest level, it's a self-worth thing, and when we know what to do and we just don't do it, which is something I've said to myself many times, and a lot of people I work with, it's like, do we really know? Do you know what I mean? Like, if we were in an alternate reality and we didn't know about vegetables and we didn't know about movement, and someone said the cure to a lot of these lifestyle diseases is, eat these and move, we would just do it. But because we know that, we tend to ignore it, we tend to downplay it, we tend to think, oh, that's just too simple, it has to be more complicated. And then we go on these 6 and 12-week challenges and we overhaul our whole lives and we get results, but in the back of our mind we're already dreaming about the macas we're going to have at the end, because the way that you release the weight is the way that you'll keep it off. So when we get really restrictive and really depriving and really ignore ourselves, like sometimes, and it's hard to hear, it's from myself too, but people say, like, food's often the only joy I have. And, we can lightheartedly joke and say, well, you need to get new friends or new hobbies or whatever. But deep down, if you're working at a job that you don't like, or if you're in a situation that's difficult, like at the moment, globally, sometimes we can put up with that all day. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. But at the end of the night, when the kids are in bed and you just have that time to yourself and you just let go, and the beach ball smacks you in the face, and you find yourself knee deep in Tim Tams going, how did this happen? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'll start again tomorrow. And I think a lot of it is because we feel guilty forgiving to self. We feel that, you know, our needs aren't as important as others or whatever. So we don't allow that during the day or during, you know, the productive time. And in the evening, we're just so done, you know, because a lot of the people, it's the evening that gets us. And then we try and be more stringent the next day. I'll be stricter. I'll burn more calories. I'll do all this sort of stuff. But it's really about like giving to, you know, not putting yourself in between 9 p.m. and bedtime or whatever, but making yourself valued all through the day and pretty much learning to say no, which is still a challenge for me. But, you know, like an honest no rather than a resentful yes to things. And then, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's when you said, if someone else came to us and said that here's vegetables, go and exercise, this is the cure to that, that just really made me think about why so many people get involved with fad diets. Because, this is new information. I haven't heard about intermittent fasting before, so this must be the way because I know all the other stuff and I've been doing all of the other stuff, but it hasn't been working. So now I need to do a Pritikin diet or a whatever the diet is, do that because this must be better than what I've been doing because I do know it. That is, for me, that's a big aha moment, and it really does open the door as to why there's so much success in something that's just a bit different thinking because, that must be the way it works then.
Yes. And the other thing that came up when you were speaking, a lot of people say, why does it not work as well the second time? Like, I've done paleo, I've done keto before, I do it again, I don't get the results I had the first time. Like, you have a little bit of results, but not the same, because that subconscious part of you is like, well, I know all this. So you aren't as rigid or as structured. And it doesn't have to be like, I don't believe in any form of structure or rigidity, because then part of me is my inner rebels waiting. Do you know what I mean? So it's not saying like no holds barred, but it's, if you're doing something because you feel you should, there's eventually going to come a time where you won't do it anymore. It's like holding that ball underwater. You get exhausted and you give up. So it's about learning to listen to yourself and trust yourself, because at some stage we all had that. And for me, a big epiphany, a big turning point was having children, not just because I didn't want them to inherit the habits I had, because we all know kids do what they model, not what we tell them. So I can't be like saying, eat this while I'm shoveling Tim Tams and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But also because I just watched and I was fascinated by my children, because some days they would eat so much. I'd be like, oh my gosh. And other days they'd hardly eat anything. And I remember when my mum was visiting a couple of times, she'd be getting all panicked if my kids didn't have enough to eat. I'd be like, oh, that's all right. They'll eat more tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, why don't we do that? Like, we have to eat by the clock, or we have to eat our calories or our points or whatever. And some days we just don't feel like them. And they're our good days. So we celebrate and go, yeah, I'm so good. But then we have the bad days and we've eaten our allotment by 10 a.m. and we beat ourselves up the rest of the day. But what if we just accepted, if we were truly hungry, that we need that bit more, and it balanced out over the week or the month? And it was amazing. So simple, but amazing, you know?
Yeah, that is very true. Into, some days, if you're really getting into a project, you may not even think about eating. Whereas other days you're going, okay, I haven't eaten for 35 minutes. I think I'm hungry now. And and you sort of put that down as a bit of a boredom factor, but it might be just that you need more energy, there might be more activity, or there might be more brain activity going on it just is different than the days you just go, I didn't even realize I missed lunch. It's a very different space, isn't it? Yeah.
I like to think in caveman days, like not a paleo diet or whatever, but in paleo times, we didn't have refrigeration or storage or any things we did now. When we were nomadic, we would walk along and we'd find a field of berries and we'd eat them all because they were there. And then we might wander for a few days. So when we actually start listening to our body, like, another turning point for me was, as I said, I live interstate from my parents. They're in Tasmania. It's quite cold. And Dad rang one day and he said, oh, what's the temperature there? Because I'm in Sydney now. I was like, oh, it's cold. He's like, what temperature is it? I'm like, I don't know. It's cold. And we were just having this argument. It was quite fascinating. Anyway, I'm like, hang on, I'll look it up. So I Googled it and I'm like, it's 8. And he goes, oh, you're allowed to be cold then. And in that moment, like I had this epiphany, because it was like the same thing was with food. It'd be like, oh, I feel hungry. Oh no, it's 10 o'clock. Can't eat yet. You know, oh, it's 11 o'clock. Oh, it's 12. I'm allowed to be hungry now. Do you know what I mean? So it's like when we have these societal conditionings that outside things saying, so from that moment, like if it was 10 o'clock and I felt hungry and I looked, I'd just eat lunch, you know, early. And people were like, oh, if I was hungry later, I'd eat a second lunch because it would work out. Because the other thing we tend to do, 10 o'clock, too early for lunch, I just have a chocolate bar or a donut because we don't count that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, anything brown doesn't have calories. That's what people have told me over time.
Exactly, but it's fascinating. It's like we're not allowed to eat because it's not official meal time. So we'll either beat ourselves up or we'll eat some crap and then not count it. Yeah. And then if we just ate, it was the same with the temperature thing. Like you're allowed to be. It doesn't matter externally what it is. If you feel it internally and listen, it's valid, as opposed to I smell McDonald's or I walk you past a bakery or that cue that suddenly, you know, you have to have it, that you didn't think about it a minute before. You know?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And particularly smells such a great reminder for us that it really does trigger a lot of emotions usually, as well as the sense of needing food. Sweet smell. I know I used to have a job where I would go back a house at the Sheraton in Brisbane, which is now the Sofitel, and they had one of their bakeries, one of their kitchens was purely, it was kept separate than the other kitchen, so you wouldn't get any of the other smells in it, and it was purely a dessert kitchen. So you'd walk in there and it would just smell of chocolate. That always smelt of chocolate. It was my favorite place in the whole hotel, and back a house was this chocolate kitchen. But you could never go there if you thought you were going to be feeling hungry or anything.
My parents used to own a shop downwind from Cadbury's, the chocolate factory in Tassie, and I remember helping out there many a day and be like, oh, I have to have chocolate because you can smell it.
Yeah, so there's all those triggers as well. I really like that analogy about it's cold. What's relevant to cold, and it is. It's every individual person. So because I'm in Queensland, so for me, hot starts around 35 degrees. You know, that's hot, and it's probably going to be muggy at 35 degrees. We're in spring now and the temperatures have been 29 degrees during the day, and it's perfect, but it could be even, that's a bit not cool, but if I've got friends that are in Tasmania, if it's 29 and 30 degrees there, you know, they've got the air conditioning on. It's
stinking for them. Yes.
Yeah.
When we go home for Christmas, it's funny. Everyone's got the aircon on. I always take a jumper now. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm cold because I'm acclimatized. And it's the same with food and our habits and the way that we're conditioned and brought up to eat. It can change. And people from other cultures or other ways of doing, like I remember when I was young, we had the war on fat, like, you know, low fat. And I go to people's houses and I was never allowed to have avocado as a child because it was full of fat. And I think the irony of it now, being this fat kid, because I was, like, it sounds horrible, but I was saying, I can't have that because it's full of fat. But, like, the good fats and all this stuff that we didn't know. But it's just the conditioning. It's still now, when I go to have an avocado, I feel this little bit of indulgence because it feels like it's a bad food.
And it's on every breakfast meal. I attend a lot of networking events, so every breakfast meal I have an order is got avocado on it, which is a different thing.
It's not necessarily bad. Like my parents, when they visit now, and I do eat avocado and other things, like, what are you having? So when they visit, I have to go and buy them the skim milk, the skim butter, like mud, all that stuff that I don't have because they still refuse to have things that are full of fat, and that's their conditioning. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's a bit hard to overcome that. And as you said, with different people with different nationalities, I've got a lot of people that I interact with that are from India, particularly, and they are all usually very trim and eat really healthfully as well. But food is a celebration for them as well, and there's a lot of cultures where food is a major celebration, but I think there's also been a lot of lack of food in those cultures as well, and so when the opportunity arises, they celebrate, but they don't overindulge, which is, we mentioned Christmas, everyone that I know usually overindulges for Christmas, whether it's drinks or alcohol or food. It's where we don't, so why do we do that? That's because it's not, if it's there, we just go, I'm just going to eat it,
That's part of it. In a buffet or a celebration type event, I say that's the automatic hand syndrome. Like, you just automatically are next to it. So I always position myself as far away from the food as I can. Not that that's a problem at the moment. But the other thing I think is, for those of us who have a dieting mentality or are yo-yo dieters, we tell ourselves we're never going to have it again. So when we do have it, we might as well make the most of it. So, it's like, I'm going to start again tomorrow. I'm going to start on Monday, the universal day to change our lives. And even shows like The Biggest Loser, I don't know, I haven't watched it recently, but they used to have like the last hurrah, the food funeral, the thing, and they'd televise it and they'd show them how much they had. And it was like, well, not only do you have the sugar downer to deal with after having all that, but it's the mindset thing. And it was interesting. I had a friend I met up with a few weeks ago. We went to Pancake on the Rocks. I love pancakes. And anyway, before we went in there, she said she hadn't had anything. She'd been doing this strict keto or paleo thing for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, well, let's go somewhere and get something. She said, no, I really want to have this. And we got it. And she watched me eat a couple of bites and I was done. And she was like, can I have yours? I always find that weird. I'm like, sure. And then we're talking about it afterward, not from the thing of judgment, but she'd eaten this huge stack and all the cream and asked for extra. And, and then I was just making the observation that because she's going to start it again tomorrow and like she's going to make the most of it. And she's like, wow, if I could be like you and go and have 3 bites and be done, I wouldn't have this issue. So often, like, this big problem that we make it out to be is mostly because we eat too much. If we just had a little bit, because you knew you could have it again tomorrow. Like, I'm the least healthy weight loss coach there is. I've actually been hired because I went to one of the Zoom calls eating a drumstick, and someone was like, oh wow, what do you do? And I'm eating around the drumstick going, I'm a weight loss coach. I didn't think they were going to ask me. And anyway, it's because when I've had enough, I don't continue to eat. And like, I really love KFC, but only 1 in 10 times will they get the chips right. Most of the time, too hot, too cold, not enough salt, too much salt. And my husband's like, he's still amazed that I can just throw it away. But he's like, why do you keep trying? I'm like, for the 10% that it's right. But it's waste or waste. It's waste on our body if we don't need it, or it's waste in the garbage bin. If you can accept that either way, that's food's wasted when you are full or when you are satisfied, then that's a huge shift, because we don't want to waste things, so we eat it, but then it's literally on our waist. So it's something I say to myself all the time.
I love that. I'm probably going to use that somewhere in the title of this, is that waste or waste. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And it's that sense of doing without. I know I say to my husband, because he'll eat quite quickly and he'll have the leftover if there's something that nobody else wants to eat. And I'll say to him about, you don't really need to have that. And where did that come from? And he'll say, well, in their family, they had quite a few children. So you made sure that you got in for your fill and you didn't miss out on anything. So again, that was a behavior born out of the habit or the necessity with when you've got quite a few children.
Yeah, exactly. My mum was much the same. She had a big family, and apparently they used to make the eggs and then cut the top, eat it out, turn it over, and then you come along if you were late to the breakfast table and get an empty egg. So like when there's food, and it's fascinating because that's not our fault. That's the way we've been conditioned, but it is our responsibility to overcome it or to work out ways to get around it. And yeah, eating, it's fascinating watching the dynamics of people eat from a place of non-judgment, just observation. Because like I went to a conference pre-COVID and they always have the bread roll. I don't eat the bread roll. I don't need it. Do you know what I mean? Like it fills me up and I don't want the main. But the lady I was seated next to, you could see her mind turning, and we were talking, and anyway, about halfway through the main, she's like, are you going to eat that? And I was like, no. She's like, can I have it? She couldn't cope with the fact that bread roll was sitting there. And it was fascinating. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it wasn't even that nice, apparently. It was dry, but it's like, I can't leave it. And it's like, yeah, I used to be like that too. Or I used to think I can't eat 1 or 2 squares of chocolate. I have to eat the whole block because that's the way I've been conditioned. And it was another turning point for me. I'm sitting in front of the television one night watching something, and I'm putting my hand in the packet and I can hear the wrapper rattling. And I realised I'd eaten the last piece. And like I'd always savoured the last piece. So literally it's like I had to go to the shop and get another block because I couldn't not savour the last piece. And as I'm in the shop, in the checkout going, what is this? Like, what about the other 40 pieces? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like when we do things unconsciously, when we eat directly from a packet and we're distracted by the television or whatever, and we're not truly present. So I eat everything now plated up, even if it's just like one Tim Tam, because if I eat from the packet, as soon as I start doing that, I go unconscious, you know? So it's like, if I can't be bothered putting it on a plate and sitting down, I'm not hungry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for me, candy is my thing, and it's really, I have to eat the whole packet. And I don't feel unwell after eating a whole packet of something. So if it's a small packet, large packet, doesn't matter. It's the whole packet.
Yeah,
I can't leave anything left behind. Nothing.
Exactly. And it's funny now because I do, I'm not saying it's cured. Like I have moments. So for me, it's like I call green lights is when everything's going great. Red lights is when things is going terrible. And orange is when I'm slipping. So the other day I bought something for the kids. So I was like, yeah, something's going on here. Do you know what I mean? But normally I can have the stuff, and I've got my little stash here in my desk. And I was on a call once, and my son came in, he's opening it up, getting the chocolate out. They're like, what is he doing? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's where we've all got a chocolate drawer. Do you know what I mean? But to be able to have it there and not have to replace it all the time or eat, you know, things. But it just, when that starts to slip, when I start to eat too much and stuff, it's a sign. Where am I not looking after myself? Where am I overgiving? And how can I come back in, rather than thinking I need to be fixed? Because none of us are broken. We've just had habits that don't serve us.
And that's the thing, is those habits that don't serve us. And so going back to that overgiving part as well, I'm just trying to relate that back to that whole bag of lollies that I will have to finish. I know there's something behind it, and I've set up triggers. If I prefer not to go and buy fuel, because that's a trigger. There's always something at the counter that really, just to be able to walk out quickly. So, and I unfortunately don't do the groceries very often in our house, so that works as well. But it's those things eliminating, and I could never have a chocolate drawer.
Yeah, I do now, with many flavors in there. So it feels really indulgent. But sometimes when it's, as I said, when it's going at a faster rate than I would anticipate or whatever, that's my orange light. This needs to be addressed. And it's usually I'm not making time for self, because when we are in times of stress or stuff, we tend to put ourselves last. And, you know, that's when we actually need to put ourselves first. Like there's that quote, I can't remember if it's Buddha or someone who was saying that if I had how many hours to cut down my tree, like I'd spend an hour, or no, it's not that one. The one, he spends an hour a day meditating, and someone says, what if your day's busy? He's like, I spend 2. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like we go, oh, I'll skip the walk, or I'll skip the meditation, or I'll skip the journaling and whatever. But they're the things that give us the peace to turn up. Like today, as we're recording this, I've got a really busy day after this. I've got to take my son to a hearing test and my daughter to something else and all this. I was like, oh, well, I'll just skip that, like my morning routine. And I was like, no. Other things can get pushed around, because when we don't show up for ourselves, then we can't fully show up in what we're doing. And then that's when we end up eating, because I think it brings us back into our body. When we get stressed, we get up in our head thinking about all the things we've got to do, respond to, answer, whatever. And that few minutes where we're eating, it brings us back into our body. And also we feel guilty for taking a break. So if we're eating, well, a person's got to eat. So the guilt's not there. Do you know what I mean?
I'm so hearing you. Each day when I'm working from home, I stop for lunch and I make a really nice chicken salad wrap. It's my thing to do. I'll go outside, I'll sit there and I'll read a book. But as soon as I finished eating, I start to feel guilty about continuing to sit there and read a book. Now I've put a time on it, so I go, right, half an hour. But yes, that's part of it, isn't it? So while you're eating, it's not guilty.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of us watch TV and eat, and that's become so associated that some people think they can't. And for me, I have this habit now. It's diamond dot. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like cross stitch for lazy people. It's a sticky mat, and you've got this little wand, and you pick up these dots and you put them on. But that replaces my eating, so I can watch television because I like my hands to be full. But if I just watch television, I don't know, it just feels so indulgent for me.
Yeah, and that really just makes a whole lot of sense. And another part, you brought up about the children. A friend of mine is a trainer, and she said she realized that what she was doing, if the kids, particularly good day, something will happen and she'll treat them to McDonald's. And then she realized the habit that she was building is that McDonald's was a treat and not what it is.
It's funny you should say that. So when we take our kids to McDonald's, for whatever reason, we've always called it the restaurant. I don't know why. We just have. I don't like the golden arches and that. And a few times people have said, oh, your kids are so cultured. They eat at a restaurant, thinking it's McDonald's. But no, in saying that, I've never been particularly gifted at sport, and neither of my kids. Like we have fun, but we're never going to win. And at my daughter's cross country, she's only quite young. She's 7. She came very much last and she was very upset and whatever. And my first thought, like I caught myself literally as we were walking in there, was to take her to the bakery. Let's go get cake. And I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? So in times of stress, I believe our ingrained habits, the ones we were brought up with when we were children, are more likely to come back. And it's that observing thing. Or like when I took my kids to the doctors and they have to have something done and the doctors would offer them a lolly, that's always irritated me. But when we moved here, the doctor gives them like a Matchbox car, which I think must be expensive, but that's cool. But, but I don't know, we tend to reward, whether it be food or things, but it's like, what are we setting up that you do something crappy and you get a reward? Sometimes you just got to do hard things. But anyway, a lot of us do that. And even the times that I've done Weight Watchers, I'd often see people at the meeting where they're unpacking our habits and they bring their children, obviously can't leave them in the car, but buy Maccas for them. So it's like you're unpacking this, but then you're also creating it. I never quite understood how we do that and why we do that,
Yeah, and again, I think that's very good advertising. That's where it's ingrained, that's how they advertise, that it is a reward and it's a fun family time. Very, very clever advertising.
The Happy Meal comes with a toy. Like I remember saying to my son Cassie the other day, do you actually like the food? And he's like, no, but he likes the toy. It's like, it's interesting. Do you know?
Yeah. And it, we can do maybe other things, but I know when you're talking about rewarding yourself, you don't necessarily, because one of my things that I love to do for myself is to have a massage, and indulge in something like that. But when you talk about that as a reward, it's not quite, or making time for yourself is not those sort of things when you talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's different. I think like there's self-care and things that can be in our routine, because like I think having a regular massage is great, especially, I think that's good. But if we're only going to give that to ourselves, if we've achieved something, like why are we not worthy otherwise? Like there's a whole other thing we could go in there. But like, I'm not against rewards. I often reward myself with books. So I have quite an avid collection. But now what I've really realized is the reward is more the time to read the book. I keep collecting things, but I don't actually give myself time to enjoy them. So now, like, we said before, go out in the sun and read your book. That could be a reward. It doesn't take any money. It's not going to add anything to your waist, but it's a true reward because it's that time to self.
Yeah, that time to self. That's so important. And that's it is that time to self. That is a reward to self, particularly because we tend to be so goal orientated with everything else in our lives. But when it comes to that and scheduling that time in, that's not necessarily what we do.
Yeah, and we don't reward that. We don't because we think it feels indulgent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So imagine if we gave ourselves a tick or a reward for that. So like a little thing I do now when I organise my day is I do checklists, because I used to cross everything off, but then I get to the end of the day and I'd have this empty thing and I'd be like, oh, like, I can't see. So now I type it up the night before, but I check the box so then I can feel this sense of achievement. But instead of just doing items like recording podcast, client session, whatever, I also have being things. Like on today's one was 25 minutes of my book. because why shouldn't I acknowledge that? I enjoy that. I look forward to it. And like some connecting time with my children, asking my children how their day went. Like these things, not that they're scheduled, not that they're, you know, prescribed, but that it allows for the wholeness rather than just recognizing things that, you know, are income producing or are society accepted. What about the time for us? So I call them moments. I have moments on my checklist as well.
That's interesting. Something I did this morning, I had down in my diary to attend this networking event that was down near Moreton Bay. And as I'm driving along, I've got, oh my gosh, the bay looks amazing. So I stopped and took a photograph. And then when I got there, it wasn't on and I couldn't figure out where it was or anything. So it was a 45-minute drive to get there. So, but the bay was beautiful, but I could have spent longer just enjoying that. And I did have a little bit of, you know, watching people while I was waiting and trying to figure it out. But that would have been then sort of just driving home. That would have been some downtime as well. Although saying that, I listen to fiction when I drive. I do not listen to nonfiction because I read enough nonfiction. So I listen to there was all witches and things like that this morning. So that hour and a half drive all up, I got an hour and a half of my book. So sometimes I just like driving just to
I do
listen
that too.
to my
It's
book.
interesting. The sport I go to now, I do pole dancing where we've moved to. The studio is quite far away. And I always think, oh, that time it takes, you know, away from my kids to drive there and back. I'm like, hey, but it's more book time. Do you know what I mean? So I do like that part of it.
Yeah. So for me, that is something that is, I give myself time. I don't mind where we're based here. It's, you know, 40 minutes to the Gold Coast or 40 minutes into the city or 40 minutes everywhere. So it's just, yeah, you get a lot of, I just totally off track. Have you read the book Who Moved My Cheese?
Yes.
So it's such a short book. I went down to similar to where I was this morning and back again, and I finished the book. And you know, from start to finish, it's such a small book, and I felt dudded. I felt
book hangover. I need some more.
I need another book. I always have about 3 books in the car to listen to for the next one and the next one and the next one. That, yeah, I mean, I suppose that's just a nice little reward too, isn't it? That doesn't necessarily involve food. I was a sales rep for about 4 years and had a lot of habits around eating and driving, just a lot throughout the day, which have changed now, but it took a significant amount of time that you just didn't start eating when you got in the car.
Yeah, I have, I don't like rules. I have eating guidelines, and one of mine is no eating in the car, because I could slam a block of chocolate from the supermarket to here and it's a 5-minute drive. Do you know what I mean? And like for some people, they may need to. But this is the thing about eating guidelines. It's not about finding someone else's and making them your own. It's about creating your own. So like in my circumstances, I don't need to eat in the car, but if you were, say, a long haul driver or something, you may need to. But another one of my eating guidelines is I don't eat standing up because that prevents me eating at the fridge or the pantry. I don't eat out of a packet. Like everything needs to be plated up because if I can't be bothered plating it, as I said, I'm not really hungry. And it's just a matter of playing around with them. So if I go to an event, networking event, I never eat the hors d'oeuvres or anything like the finger food because I don't really need it, you know, and then I don't tend to eat the meal. So it's just little things. And when you have the guidelines in place, the decision's taken out because they talk about decision fatigue at the moment. Will I, won't I, should I, shouldn't I, can I, can't I eat everything? Do you know what I mean? So it's just, it's a non-issue because I don't eat like that. At the cinema, that was the hardest one. Going to the cinema.
Because you're seated.
Yeah.
So that's that rule gone out.
Yeah, because calories eaten in the dark don't count, right?
It's like brown ones. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's those habits, like me going into a service station. I run and I got a diesel car, so I can't run it down to empty. But it just is getting someone else, a husband, to go fill it just because I don't want to go to serve.
Because they usually give you an extra 4 cents off if you spend however many dollars, which is, you know, a couple of chocolate bars and a Coke. Yeah. I know. I've been in there. You know?
I'm just finding, you know, there's a lot of aha moments because there's things that, yeah, that just makes so much sense. One of the ladies I used to work with, she would always have a Monday diet. She'd be, no, can't do it today. It's not Monday. And sometimes, you know, we had challenges at work and things like that, and they'd start on a Tuesday. She said, I can't start. It's not Monday. And she wouldn't. She just would not start unless it was started on a Monday.
I remember that, like, for me, at 150 kilos, there've been a lot of last moments. Like, there was so many. But the one that truly stands out, and I think was my last moment, I was seeing a neurosurgeon because I hurt my back. I have spinal fractures in my vertebrae because I was so heavy. And anyway, he said spinal fusion surgery. Now, if you drop weight, there's 50% chance you won't need it. They can recover on their own. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And it was Tuesday afternoon, and it was like 4:00 when I was seeing him. So, like, I literally started Tuesday night, but I didn't do the whole, let's throw everything out of the pantry. Let's, do all the stuff I'd done so many times before. And it was just like, yeah. So, and if I do run things, I don't run challenges. No one needs any more challenges. But yeah, I never start on a Monday or the 1st. Or I don't even mark it in January. And so many people are like, oh, New Year. I'm like, yeah, no, New Year, same old you. February is actually my hottest month. But
Okay. Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, no, that is. And sometimes, I mean, it's the same, they say with drug addicts, they need that hit rock bottom or hit that moment where you go, you'll need surgery.
Yep.
And you go, well, maybe I better do something, or we've changed this, or how can you change it? So you've come a long way. And obviously the neuro-linguistic programming and the hypnosis and all of those different modalities that you have used for yourself and then work with your clients have made a lot of difference.
Totally. And they're all tools in your tool belt. I tell people that they can often, we get overwhelmed with all the choices, and it's not like you have to do everything, because if you used every modality every single day, well, you wouldn't have time to do all the other stuff. But it's like, basically they're all on my tool belt, and I check in with which one I need, and sometimes one doesn't work as well as another, so you change it out. And it's about helping people create and find what works for them, because so many of us are told that you have to do it this way. Like, I was at something recently, and someone told me you couldn't lose weight without running, and I just burst out laughing. It was probably rude. I feel a little bit guilty, but I was like, I've dropped 78 kilos, and trust me, if I'm running, you run too, because something's chasing me or something's going to blow up. But, like, and we get conditioned, and then we believe that, and we think, oh, well, I can't do it. So it's like finding out what works for you and trusting that there is a way, and you don't have to prescribe to all these weird rules.
Yeah. No, that's really, really fascinating. Takeaway points. What's free takeaway points? I usually ask for things that people can go, oh my gosh, I've just learnt so much, but here's the 3 points that I'm going to apply or do, but they won't be rules.
I definitely think the waste or waste. So, like, really making that shift from either way it's wasted. So I could waste it in the garbage bin, or I can waste it on my body. And then if garbage really bothers you, you could get compost, you could freeze it. There's many other things, but you don't need to eat it. That'd be the first one. The second one would be the reason when you revisit something that it doesn't have the same success it did the first time was because part of you's already dismissing it. Like, I know all that. So are you doing it, or are you really doing it? Because, like, when we learn something new and it's exciting, it's fresh, like, let's weigh our portions, or let's measure, or I don't do any of those things now, but they have success because it is new and you're fully present. So when you're revisiting something, if there was something that worked for you before and you like want to try it again, try it with fresh eyes. As soon as you feel that I know it, like, disregard and go, yeah, but am I doing it?
That's a big key one for me. I think that's really important to understand that.
Yeah. And the third one would be to create some eating guidelines. And even if you start, like, I would start, maybe write yourself 3 or 4, pick one which is like your easiest one, and start with that, because that's the other thing we tend to do. We try and overhaul everything at once, and then we burn ourselves out. So what's one little thing from this list? It's like, okay, I'm not going to buy things at the servo. I'm going to either ask my husband to fuel it up, or I'm going, like, something like that. And just because positive compound interest, these one little change, you think, oh, what's that going to do? Today it might not do anything, or tomorrow. But imagine, like, a month, 6 months, a year's worth of this thing. Like, if you're eating chocolate whenever you go to the supermarket, and you buy a family block and you stop that, not only will you save money, but you will save your health too. And for me, I didn't mention this, it's a takeaway that I didn't mention the point during the talk, but what I did was I created a separate bank account. I transferred the money I would have spent on the chocolate over to that. And then I funded a tummy tuck with it. So, you know what I mean?
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thousands of dollars I was inadvertently spending unconsciously just buying junk. And now I still transfer that money and I use it for family holidays. So
that's fantastic. I mean, that's a great incentive as well.
Because I would have spent it anyway. That money's gone. So if I'm like, oh, I want a chocolate, I want an ice cream. Oh, that would have been $9, $10, $15. It's another account with a separate bank, so I don't see it and want to use it for bills or whatever. And then every now and then I look at it, and I was looking at it this morning actually, so that's $3,400 in it. So
fantastic.
It adds up because we don't count it. We really discount it. So when we move it somewhere else and we've already spent it, then we can use it for something useful.
Yeah, no, and it does adding up. That's really important. You'll be able to go anywhere in New South Wales.
Yes, definitely. Oh, it's funny. Pre-COVID, when it hit, we were actually on a cruise that was funded with that. So you know, it adds up.
Yeah, no, and that. Yeah, that's really important. What was the point before that? Was one other the point just before?
So the waste or waste, if you're revisiting something, revisit it with fresh eyes. When you catch yourself saying, I know that, really, am I doing it? And then, like transferring the money somewhere else. Yeah,
and changing the habits with the guidelines, right? Not rules,
guidelines. Yeah, making it, picking one though, starting small.
I know one through COVID that I had, and was I like a glass of wine, but I only drink wine when I'm socializing.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So it's not of an afternoon, or it's, you just don't have it because it's just, I'm not socializing. So
yeah.
But now I'm back socializing a lot.
So unless you're on Zoom having a quarantini.
There was a couple of Friday afternoon ones of that, but yes, but now I am back socializing a lot. So we've got to readjust that rule.
Definitely.
Absolutely. How can people get in touch with you, Suzanne?
If they come to my website, it's SuzanneCulberg.com. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes because it's interesting spelling. And on my website, you can join up for my newsletter. It's probably the best thing. If you click on there, I tend to send out unique stuff, not that's on my website or my Facebook page. And little tips, little things that you can try out. And
there's just been so much great advice, and it's been really different than what you would expect, from a weight loss coach. Or is that the terminology though? Is that something that
I struggle with this, and I get picked up by my clients all the time because they're like, "Why do you call yourself a weight loss coach? Because you hate the term weight loss and you say release and all this sort of stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's marketing. Like nobody knows what release is," and it's interesting. I'm still working on that road myself, how I describe what I do, but I really believe the traditional weight loss of working on what you're eating and how you're exercising is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. So I help people go, what's underneath? Why are they eating? Why have they made these associations? And how can we unpack them and clear them? So then the weight largely takes care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really wonderful, and I just thoroughly enjoy it. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Janeen. I've had fun.
Yeah, it's great. And that's another episode of the We Are Women podcast. I am Janeen Vosper. You can download some free ebooks on my website, which is janeenvosper.com. So go and check that out. And if there's anything that I can help you with at all, I do have a 20-minute, you can book in for a 20-minute free strategy call. And there's lots of opportunities with that strategy call to talk about issues that you might be having in your business and how I might be able to help you, or how I can direct you to somebody who can definitely help you. So I look forward to you joining me again on the next episode of the We Are Women podcast. Bye for now.